Heat shimmers over the auction yard, thick as breath from a dying bull. Emily stands on the block, wrists bound, buyer's eyes crawling over her like cold insects. At the rail, Tommy Blaine says nothing, jaw set, a silver coin flipping in his fingers as a dangerous plan stirs. The sheriff's gaze presses heavy on his back, town laws tightening like rope around his throat. When Tommy steps forward, he offers not ownership, but freedom, and the murmurs sharpen to blades. Save Emily now, or watch her vanish into a wagon shadow where names are erased. What does a man owe his own code when the town calls it sin? Tommy Blaine wasn't built for noise. A war scar carved across his ribs, he rode a rangy roan mare, speaking little, keeping farther from saloon heat than most men kept from rattlesnakes. Folks said he carried sorrow like a second saddlebag. Maybe that was true. He spent most days visiting a grave outside town, his brother's, shot dead for helping 3 runaways cross the ridge. Tommy talked to that grave more than he talked to any living soul. Emily Johnson stood on the auction block with her chin up and her wrists tied. She'd learned to read from a field preacher who tore pages from an old Bible and handed them around like crumbs to starving birds. Her eyes were clear even now, steady even with fear thickening the air. Below her, the auctioneer's chant thumped like a gallows drum. Buyers whispered about breeding, their voices slick with grease and whiskey, and Tommy felt his brother's blood boil again inside his chest. He stepped forward. The sheriff watched him with the kind of stare that weighed sins before they were even committed. Tommy lifted his hand. "I'll take her." Coins clacked. A hush spread. He paid the price without blinking, climbed the platform, and took the bill of sale. Then, in front of the sheriff, in front of every man sweating greed from his pores, Tommy tore the paper clean in 2. "She's free." For a heartbeat, the yard was still. Then came spit hitting dust. Someone muttered, "miscegenation." Another said, "lawbreaker." Sheriff Colton stepped closer, jaw grinding. "Freedom don't mean welcome, Blaine. Not here." The church bell tolled behind them, low and hollow, a verdict more than a call. Emily met Tommy's eyes. "I choose my escort," she said, "not my master. And my name is Emily Johnson." That was the moment the stakes fixed themselves like nails in timber. Leave this town alive, find lawful papers to prove her freedom, and survive the eyes, guns, and gossip already sharpening behind them. They stepped into Main Street sunlight. It felt colder than the shade. Their goal was simple on paper. Reach Vermilion, find Judge Booker, and have Emily's manumission sealed in law. But Colton's deputies trailed them like hungry wolves, and gossip stirred a posse before they'd even cleared the last fence post. On the trail, Emily proved horse sure. She stitched a torn saddle with deft fingers and calmed a skittish gelding by a psalm. Tommy watched her with the quiet awe of a man thawing after a long winter inside himself. At camp, she recited that same psalm by firelight. Tommy, who hadn't prayed since his brother died, listened like a man remembering something he thought he'd lost. Trouble met them at a ranch gate. The rancher leaned on the post with a shotgun in one hand, refusal in the other. "No water for your kind," he said, eyes sliding to Emily. Tommy offered coin. The shotgun cocked. Emily stepped between the man's pride and Tommy's temper. "Let's go," she said, soft. They left, thirsty. The land taught cost and patience with every step. At a dusty crossroads store, the clerk hid the ledger under the counter. Can't sell to her. Tommy bought what they needed anyway: beans, bandage cloth, cartridges, and handed every item to Emily in full view of the clerk. A small rebellion, but a real one. Rumors hunted faster than horses. At the next town's post board, a flyer curled in the heat. Johnson girl returned to rightful owner. Reward. Emily's breath shook. Papers won't matter if they choose rope over law. Before Tommy could answer, a dust cloud formed behind them, riders closing in. They veered toward the red canyons, shadows swallowing them whole. The ambush struck at Cotton Draw. 3 riders flanked them, dust rising like devil smoke. Wade Harker, Colton's second, grinned with a mouthful of spite. "Law says she's property gone missing," he called. "Hand her over." Tommy's revolver stayed low, but his jaw tightened. Emily's fingers slid to the knife at her boot. A rider pressed too close. Emily sliced the cinch. Horse and man toppled in a tangle. Tommy shot a spur off another's heel, a warning shot that sang past skin but didn't break bone. They fled, but Tommy's mare took a grazing bullet. Blood darkened the flank. Speed bled out of them. They found shelter in an abandoned line shack. Emily cleaned the mare's wound and then Tommy's scraped arm. Her hands were steady, his weren't. That night, thunder rattled the boards. Emily told him about a mother sold south, a brother whose name she never learned. Silence settled like smoke between them. At dawn, Harker returned, this time with fire. Flames licked the shack walls, smoke choking their lungs. Tommy grabbed an axe. Emily soaked coats in leftover coffee. They burst through the back wall as the roof sagged, crawling low under flame as rain came like a blessing. In the mud, Harker slipped. A shot went wild and tore Tommy's ribs. Emily dragged him behind scrub brush, her breath sharp with fury and fear. Hours later, an old Navajo shepherd found them. He offered salt, water, shelter beneath his woven roof. He refused coin. "Hunger lives in all colors," he said. "Kindness must too." They left him with bowed heads. By dusk, Vermilion's courthouse spire rose on the horizon, thin as rust, bright as hope. Judge Booker listened without blinking. Emily spoke for herself, voice firm as fence posts. "I claim my freedom not as a gift," she said, "but as birthright." The judge stamped the papers. The federal seal pressed deep, cold, permanent. For a moment, they were just 2 people at a market stall, eating warm cornbread, and then a church elder from their old town spotted them. His face folded into hatred. He sent a wire home. By sundown, flyers changed tone. Fornication and race mixing. The preacher fanned the flames. Fear spread like prairie fire. Tommy faced a choice: stay in Vermilion safely, or return home to fulfill the promise he made at his brother's grave. "My debt ain't paid," he said. Emily nodded. "Then I walk with you." Their intimacy grew in small work, mending tack together, trading watch shifts under a wide sky. A farm woman offered pie, but warned them. They're waiting at the river bridge, testing your kind of courage. Smoke from torches smudged the horizon ahead. Colton's posse lined the bridge like fence posts, a rope coiled on the ground. Men hungry for an example. Colton held a false statute. Her papers are city lies. Hand her over. Tommy's hands shook, steadier on the gun than on fear. I won't become what killed my brother. Emily stepped forward, papers raised. You know me. You know my name. And you know this is wrong. A rock flew. A woman curses. A small boy watched with eyes too old. Tommy shot the rope from Colton's hand and threw his gun into the river. Chaos broke. Harker fired. Tommy's shoulder split hot with pain. Emily dragged him behind stone. An old miner on the far bank lit a lantern and set it on their side, turning his back on the posse. A quiet stand. Some townsfolk lowered guns. Others loaded them. The air hummed like hornets. Emily read the judge's order aloud. A few men stepped back in shame. Colton finally yielded. They crossed, limping. A shot shattered the lantern behind them. Darkness swallowed the bridge. Back in town, the yard filled again. Same block, same dust, same cruelty. Colton called it a character auction, a public shaming meant to break their backs. If they refused, rope waited. If they bowed, they were done. Tommy stepped onto the platform. My brother died helping people you called less than men. He laid his hat down. Emily climbed beside him and tore the new fines with the same gesture Tommy used on her bill of sale. The crowd gasped, history reversing itself in one sharp rip. Harker lunged. Dust flew. Tommy's blood bloomed crimson through his shirt. Emily dodged, swift as a whip. Then a small voice cracked the tension. They ain't slaves? The boy from the bridge. The miner lifted his lantern high, even in daylight. The crowd split. Mothers pulled sons back. A deacon lowered the church flag. When Colton reached for irons, Tommy rose trembling. You're done. For the first time, the townsfolk agreed. They stripped the star from Colton's vest. Silence fell. Wind kicked the torn fines into the air. The church bell stayed still. Tommy Blaine lay stitched on a cot in the midwife's parlor. Emily washed the blood from the floorboards. The moment felt strangely domestic, quiet, honest. Kindness arrived soft, a loaf of bread on the stoop, a bucket of nails left near their porch post. No signatures, no boasts, just small, growing shifts. Emily began a reading circle for ranch hands' children. The boy from the bridge learned his letters from her steady voice. Harker rode out bitter. Before leaving, he scratched a mark on their door, a promise of trouble someday. Freedom had a cost. Peace was never permanent. Tommy scattered wildflower seeds on his brother's grave. Debts paid, he whispered, though the earth kept its secrets. One evening by the hearth, Emily asked, "Would you have chosen this, knowing the weight?" Tommy touched the framed papers above the mantel. The weight chose me, and I chose you. They stood together as wind carried hymn notes from the church, softer now, less sharp. The horizon stretched wide. The auction yard now stands empty, just dust and memory. A torn scrap of paper rises on the wind, drifting until it lands at Emily's boot. Past and present meeting in silence.